Chapter 164. Parting Castor brought him water, strips of cloth, and a crude tunic. While Sonny was washing the blood off his body, the proud legacy carefully moved Harper's corpse into a corner, buried it under the pile of seaweed thatch, and wiped the blood off the floor as much as he could. This way, an accidental glance inside the hut would not reveal too much. Of course, even a little bit of scrutiny, and the signs of what had happened here would become apparent. While doing all this, Castor was speaking. The easiest way to get rid of a corpse is to simply toss it off the platform. With luck, it won't land on the road. But even if it does, no one would pay it a lot of attention. People die all the time out here in the dark city, especially those living in the outer settlement. He paused, then continued. However, we can't do that because Harper isn't just a random slum rat but someone who was working for the Bright Lord. The guards will become interested in his sudden death, and they'll use it to create trouble for you and Lady Nephi's. So we need to make him disappear completely. That won't be easy. Sonny glanced at him and frowned. What's the big deal? I can just carry him down the hill and dump the body somewhere in the ruins. It's night outside. No one will see anything. Castor shook his head. Castle Guard has various types of observers watching the road day and night. You will be noticed, unless someone persuades them to look the other way, of course. He sighed. It won't be cheap, but I can make it happen. Tomorrow after sunset, you will have about an hour to carry the body to the ruins and return. Sorry, but I can't buy you more time. This will wipe what little shards I have left already. His voice sounded as though the handsome young man was genuinely concerned for his comrade, but in reality, he was just reiterating how much Sonny owed him now. And if that message was not enough, he could always threaten to reveal the secret of how Harper died in the future. Castor had him in the palm of his hand. Sonny smiled darkly. And what do I do until then? The legacy shrugged. Just act natural and try not to speak to anyone. You're kind of a loner as it is. No one will suspect anything. After that, he thought for a few moments and added, Oh, this. No one should enter this hut for a long while. Harper lived in the castle for these past few months, so people in the slum won't notice his absence yet. Neither will guards since he made a report recently. We should be fine. Sonny stared at him with a strange expression. What? He shook his head. No, nothing. I'm just wondering how many bodies did you make disappear already? Castor frowned. This is my first, actually. In the dark city, it is usually more advantageous to leave the body somewhere where everyone can see. Made sense. Why kill someone if not to make others think twice before attacking you in the future? Sonny was a real amateur when it came to murder. He really could not compete with the legacies. Just like that, they left the pitiful hut behind and returned to the lodge. With no one paying him any attention, Sonny returned to his room and sat quietly on his narrow cot. He thought that he wouldn't be able to sleep this night, tormented by both the knowledge of what Nephi's was planning and the memories of Harper dying by his hand. But in the end, his exhausted consciousness slipped into oblivion as soon as his head touched the pillow. In the morning, he woke up with a start, expecting a crowd of furious slum dwellers to be rushing inside, all eager to. Well, what could they really do? If push came to shove, very few of them could actually harm him. But no one was there. After hesitating for a while, he decided to act as he would on any other day. Leaving his room, Sonny walked outside to wash his face. Neff's little helpers either greeted or ignored him, just like usual. Their smiles were friendly and fleeting. No one looked at him twice. Strangely disturbed, Sonny escaped the lodge and looked up at the sky. Nothing had changed. Everything was the same as it had been yesterday and every day before that. How could this be? He had violently murdered someone, but no one seemed to care. The world had moved on without Harper. indifferent to the pain and horror that were now frozen forever in the dead eyes of the timid, pitiful young man. Even the guards did not seem to notice the disappearance of their spy. Sonny rubbed his face, hiding a pained grimace. His head hurt with a terrible migraine. If they don't care, why should I? Forget about that fool. But he did care. Irrational as it was, he felt compelled to mourn the death of his victim, even if he was the only one who would. Maybe because this situation was eerily identical to how he had always imagined his own death to happen, utterly unnoticed. Discarded and forgotten, with not a single soul to care that he had ever existed. Pathetic. Returning inside, Sonny entered his room and sat on the cot, staring at the wall. He spent most of the day there, going out only once to pretend to train with the Midnight Shard. While he was repeating the katas, he thought that he caught sight of Nephi's observing the movements of his sword with a frown on her face. But a second later, she was distracted and drawn away by the never-ending torrent of tasks required of her. Good riddance, go chat with Castor, see if I care. His sudden anger surprised Sonny. Well, at least it was better than the grim apathy that reigned over him this whole day. What's wrong with my mind lately? It's like I'm back on the Ashen Barrow. Frowning, he dismissed the Midnight Shard and returned to his room. However, someone was waiting for him there. It was Cassie. The blind girl stood silently with her back to the door, holding the wooden staff in her hands. Her face was unusually still. It almost looked bleak. Sonny's heart skipped a bit. Did she find out? Forcing out a fake grin, he made his voice sound cheerful and said, "Oh hey Cass, do you want something?" She turned to him and after a moment of hesitation, smiled. However, something about her smile was off. It was almost as though it was as forced as his own. The blind girl lingered, then said, "No, nothing in particular." Sonny blinked a couple of times. What's up with her today? Meanwhile, Cassie raised her hand and found his shoulder. No, actually, I have a present for you. He raised his eyebrow. A present? She nodded. In the next moment, a spark of energy suddenly traveled from her body into his. Sonny flinched. You have received a memory, Endless Spring. Wasn't it that pretty glass bottle of hers, one that contained an almost endless amount of water? Why was she giving it to him? Why are you gifting me this all of a sudden? She was silent for a few moments, then gently shook her head. I just wanted to. Why? Can't I give you something after everything that you have done for us? Sonny hesitated. I guess you can, I just didn't expect it. Cassie gripped his shoulder and remained motionless for a weirdly long amount of time. Then she looked away and said, her voice light and even, "We'll meet again soon, Sonny." Weirdo. He patted her hand and said, a little embarrassed, "Of course we will. Where would I go? This lodge is too small for us not to bump into each other all the time anyway." She slowly removed her hand and chuckled. Yeah, you're right, of course. I'll go now. With that, she turned away and headed for the door. Sonny stared at her back and shrugged. All right, bye. What has gotten into her? Reaching the doorway, Cassie froze for a second. Without turning her head and letting him see her face, she lingered for a while, then quietly said, Goodbye, Sonny. For the rest of the day, Sonny had nothing to do but count the hours until sunset. When the night descended, he would have to return to the scene of the crime he had committed, retrieve the body of his victim, and carry it into the ruins under the cover of darkness. How did it come to this? Alone in his tiny room, he stared at the wall and waited. Soon, the fear of going into the dark city at night overpowered the bleak and hollow feeling that reigned over his soul. People rarely risked leaving the hill after the dark. In the starless void of the forgotten shore, any source of light was bound to attract the attention of creatures that no human would even want to meet. Countless horrors stalked the streets of the city at night. Only a madman would risk entering the ruins after the sun was gone. Of course, there were plenty of madmen in the dark city. Sonny at least didn't need any light. He also knew the area surrounding the bright castle well enough to avoid most danger. The weeks he had spent learning from Effie didn't go to waste. I should be fine. With the shadows hiding his every movement, Sonny was sure of his ability to at least run away should something happen. Still, with each passing minute, his heart felt colder and colder. When the shadow of the Crimson Spire drowned the world and colored his thoughts with the eerie feeling of dread, he gritted his teeth. It's almost time. However, before the sun completely disappeared, another unexpected guest appeared at the doorstep of his room. Looking at Sonny with a scowl, Nephi's gestured for him to stand up and said in an even tone, "Come with me." Sonny's heart skipped a bit. What does she want? Suppressing the sickly fear of being caught, he lingered for a few moments, then slowly stood up and followed Changing Star out of the lodge. Together, the two of them walked to a secluded part of the slum. Neph remained silent, not even looking in his direction. She seemed calm, like always. Sonny, however, struggled to keep himself from panicking. Various thoughts, one darker than the other, found their way into his head. Did that bastard Castor tell her everything? Finally, they reached the remote alley where no one would have been able to overhear their conversation. It was filled with nothing but the crimson light of sunset and deep shadows. Turning around, Changing Star looked at him with a frown. Sonny met her gaze, his face grim. He felt as though he was staring at his judge and executioner. I've seen you practicing with the sword today. Your moves were weak and aimless. It was as if you had lost all clarity. What were you thinking about? Sonny slowly exhaled. So that's what this was about. She didn't know anything. She just picked up on the turmoil raging in his mind. He should have felt relieved, but for some reason, Sonny felt anger rising in his chest instead. With a crooked smile, he looked away and answered, "Murder, I was thinking about murder." Nephi's tilted her head, waiting for an explanation. Sonny remained silent for a few moments, then said, his voice strangely cold, "You once told me that the essence of combat is murder, didn't you?" She gave him a nod. He stared at her, then said, "Well, how come you know so much about murder, Neph?" "Huh. I wanted to ask you that since the day you cut off Andel's head without so much as batting an eye. You are out here preaching about how we are all fellow humans, not some beasts. Was Andel not human?" She scowled. "Is this what it's all about?" Sonny gritted his teeth. "It's a part of it." Nephi's was silent for a long time. At some point, she absent-mindedly raised one arm and rubbed her neck. Finally, she said, "It's not that I have murdered a lot of people. It's that a lot of people have tried to murder me." Sonny blinked. "Why would anyone want to kill you?" She smiled. "Why, all kinds of reasons, really. My family was really powerful once, don't you remember? But power, it's a dangerous thing, Sonny. You can't reach its peak without creating a lot of enemies. And when your power disappears one day, all those enemies remain." Turning her face away, she said with her usual indifferent voice, "I think I was 5, 6 years old when someone tried to kill me for the first time. It was my nanny. She led me to an empty room, put her hands around my neck and tried to strangle me. I thought that it was a game. For the first few seconds, at least." Neph looked at him with white sparks dancing in her eyes. "That was how I learned what weakness is. And when my teacher, who happened to walk by, rushed inside and used his aspect ability to kill her, that was how I learned what strength is. So yes, I'm not a stranger to severed heads, Sonny. Is that what you wanted to know?" He stared at her, then slowly shook his head. How frightened she must have felt, how powerless. Powerlessness. He knew how it felt all too well. Somehow, Sonny had never imagined that proud and indomitable Changing Star had tasted it too. was shaped by it, just like he was. Meanwhile, Nephi smiled, but there was no humor in her eyes. So then, what did you want to know? Huh, Sonny, what is this all about? Do you think I haven't noticed the way you were staring at me ever since we fought the spire messenger? Come clean with it. You owe me at least this much. He glared at her for a long time, a storm of emotions written on his pale, grim face. Finally making a decision, Sonny gritted his teeth and said, I want to know what your real goal is. I want to know if it's all worth it. Changing Star frowned. There was a hint of surprise visible in her cold, gray eyes. My goal, isn't it obvious? She gestured to the slum that surrounded them and the magnificent castle towering above it. I'm trying to help these people. What else? Sonny sighed. Then turning his face away, he asked, Hey, have I ever told you about my sister? Nephi's blinked. No, why bring this up all of the sudden? He smiled wistfully. I just was reminded of her recently, so I thought I'd share. You see, our parents died when we were little. She got adopted, but I ended up on the streets. Life wasn't really sweet for me. In fact, it was nothing but unsavory and bitter. So, young as I was, I simply imagined that it was the same for her. That's why I got obsessed with the idea of finding her. I had this fantasy in my head, of saving and protecting her, becoming a family again. Sonny grimaced. But how could a penniless undesirable like me find anyone? You know how the city databases are. Even if they're functional, unsealing anything requires you to be a citizen, and one of a considerable rank too. However, I was ready to do anything to accomplish my goal. So I saved up money. A street kid can't earn much, but even then I saved up as much as I could. A dark expression appeared on his face. Even if I had almost nothing to eat, I would keep putting away the pathetic amount of credits I had earned through doing all kinds of horrid crap. And after 4 or 5 years of this, by the time I was nearly 17, I finally had enough to hire a private investigator. He smiled. You see, there was this detective who sometimes hired us nobodies to gather information for him. His services weren't cheap, but I trusted him, or in him at least. So I gave all my money to that guy and told him to find my sister. And you know what? He did. One day, about a month after we made the deal, he gave me a piece of paper with an address written on it. So I went there. Nephi's hesitated for a few moments, then asked in a quiet voice, So what happened? Did you meet your sister? Sonny rubbed his face, glanced at the sky and said, Sort of. I actually met her near the tram terminal. Only at that time I didn't recognize her. You see, despite my lofty ideas of being her savior, I couldn't even really remember what she looked like. There was this girl, around 12 years old, wearing a tidy school uniform. She was walking in the same direction as me. I only realized that it was her after she entered the house from the address. He was silent for a while, then continued, his voice strangely emotionless. It was already dark. I think it was raining. The house was situated in a really nice district. They actually had the whole house to themselves. Just one family living in it, can you imagine? Well, I guess you can. Anyway, there was even a lawn, and a window, a big window that shined light outside. Watching them through that window was almost like watching a television show. Sonny remembered the splendor of it, his own embarrassing astonishment, and tried to smile. However, he failed. Standing in the shadows just outside the edge of that light, I observed her family for a while. She had parents who loved her and treated her well. She had real food and enough of it to never go hungry. She had pretty clothes and expensive textbooks. She even had cute younger siblings. They were all smiling, laughing, and having a great time together. Neff looked at him and asked, So what did you do? Sonny didn't answer immediately. Instead, he remembered how he just stood there, watching those happy people. How he looked down at his own frail body, his dirty and ragged clothes, the bruises on his bloodied knuckles, and realized how utterly out of place he was in that picture. After years of dreaming of finding his sister and saving her, he was faced with the simple fact that she never really needed him. She probably didn't even remember that he existed. More than that, returning into her life would not bring anything good to her. He didn't have anything pleasant or beneficial to offer. He could only make things worse. Out there on that dark and rainy night, while Sonny was standing in the shadows, something in his heart was extinguished forever. Something inside him died. No matter what kind of situation he would find himself in after this, nothing would really compare to the darkness he felt in that single moment. After remaining motionless for a long time, he slowly backed away, turned around, and walked into the darkness. A few days after that, he began showing the first symptoms of being infected by the nightmare spell. And the rest was history. Shaking off the unpleasant memories, Sonny pretended to be carefree and shrugged. I did the only selfless thing that I have ever done. I turned around and went away. Do you know why? Nephi slowly shook her head. Sonny grinned, the anger finally finding its way into his eyes. Because even a cretin like me was able to realize that the person he wanted to save didn't need his saving. So please tell me, Neph, why is it that you, with all your intelligence and clarity, can't seem to do the same? She stared at him, a deep frown appearing on her face. Are you implying that I lied about my intention to help these people? If so, you are wrong. Sonny clenched his fists. Before he could stop himself, words flew out of his mouth. No, to be completely honest with himself, he had to admit that he simply did not want to stop them. He was too exhausted, hurting, and shaken to keep playing this game with Neph. It was time to bring everything to light. Maybe then he would be able to regain clarity. Glaring at Changing Star, Sonny spat. Fuck you, Neph. She blinked. What? He smiled crookedly. I said go fuck yourself with that bullshit, Saint Nephi's. You might have fooled everyone else, but I know you. I know you better than anyone else. So I don't buy your whole savior act even for a second. Sonny repeated her gesture, pointing at the surrounding hovels. Help these people, please. What are you going to help them with? Help them turn into corpses. You and I both know how this ends. Cassie already told us. Fire and rivers of blood, right? Is this what you're planning? Nephi stared at him, a dark expression written on her ivory face. Her cold gray eyes weren't calm anymore. Finally, there was a burning emotion in them. Was it confusion, pain, disappointment? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Then Changing Star slowly shook her head. Finally, she seemed to find the right words. Looking Sonny right in the eyes, she slightly raised her chin and said, Fine, you got me. Sonny stared at Nephi, stunned by her answer. He didn't expect her to admit it so easily. Meanwhile, she just shrugged. What was I supposed to deny it? Why should I? You are the one who is obsessed with lies, Sonny, not me. The corner of Changing Star's mouth twitched. Actually, I have to thank you. If it wasn't for you, I would have never learned how to deceive people so easily. I had a very sheltered upbringing, for obvious reasons. Communicating with others had always been something I knew very little about. She smiled darkly. How fortunate it was to meet you of all people on this forsaken shore. Lucky me, right? Sonny blinked. What was she talking about? He remembered how, during their journey to the Dark City, Nephi's had tried to mimic Cassie and how she spoke to people. Had she been studying him too? Neph took a step forward and pierced him with an intense, burning gaze. No one survives in the dream realm alone. I knew that I won't be an exception to this rule, so I watched Cassie and you and tried my hardest to learn from you both. That's when I noticed that nothing you ever said or did was true, wasn't it? Crap. Sonny felt a cold shiver running down his spine. She scoffed. No matter what happened, you somehow always managed to keep your real thoughts, desires, and reasons hidden. I've never seen anyone so adept at deception. Congratulations, Sonny. The mind games you played with us were almost as devious as the mental hex of the soul devourer. It was nothing short of inspiring. Changing Star paused and shook her head. You can even easily turn truths into lies. How brilliant! I never even knew that such a thing was possible. Silly me. I didn't know a lot of things before I met you. She smiled. So you see, while you were learning how to use a sword from me, I was learning how to use people from you. So please, Sonny, accept my sincere gratitude. I could not have wished for a better teacher. Without you, none of this would have been possible. Nephise raised her hand and stabbed a finger at him. Then, with anger in her voice, she spat. So where do you get the audacity to blame me for doing the same thing you do to everyone you ever meet? Sonny trembled. Was she telling the truth? Did Neff actually learn how to be this manipulative and vile from him? Oh no. Someone that inexperienced couldn't have found a worse role model even if they tried. What a cruel twist of fate, to be sent into the dream realm together with a damaged, vicious man like him. Sonny gritted his teeth. That's not the same. Changing Star scowled. How is what I am doing different? I haven't told a single lie to these people. I gave them just enough truth to make them deceive themselves, just like you taught me. But what, now that it was turned around on you, it is suddenly not fair. Now you won't settle for anything less than the whole truth. She smirked. Fine, I'll tell you. Yes, you are right. There's going to be fire and rivers of blood. That is my plan, so what? How is it worse than this pathetic, hopeless existence? It isn't. I am going to kill Gunlog. After he is dead, the bright castle will become engulfed in a civil war, with each of the 5 lieutenants vying for the throne. I am going to kill them too. And when I am the last one standing. Her eyes glistened. I will gather those of us who remain alive and make a road of bones for the lucky few to reach the gateway. That is my promise. That is the salvation I offer to the people of Dark City, a chance to return to the real world or die like a human should, standing tall and with a sword in their hand, instead of living in fear like a rat. I thought that you, of all people, would understand. Sonny stared at her in disbelief. How could she be so nonchalant about the idea of causing the deaths of so many people? Had their lives no value in her eyes? But then he realized that he was looking at it all wrong. He was looking at it from his own perspective, the perspective of someone who was used to surviving at all costs, to putting survival above all else. However, that was how his old self had viewed the world. After coming to the Forgotten Shore, Sonny had learned that there were things more valuable than staying alive. And he learned it from Neff. To her, a life that was not worth living was that much worse than a worthy death. Maybe, in her mind, she really was trying to help these people. But who gave her the right to make that decision on their behalf? Shaking his head, he whispered, Is it really so terrible to live here? Is Gunlog really so bad that you would rather see all of us die than let us remain under his rule? A dark expression appeared on Changing Star's face. With cold contempt ringing in her voice, she said, Gunlog has done many despicable things, but I won't judge him for those. Who knows if any of us would have done any better? Keeping 1,000 hopeless people alive in this hell is the kind of task that can turn a saint into a demon. No, there is only one crime he committed that I can never forgive. Sonny raised an eyebrow. Which one? She lowered her chin and gritted her teeth. It's that he gave up. She looked at Sonny and said, her voice full of intensity. It's that he never even tried to reach the gateway. With so many years to prepare and hundreds of powerful fighters under his command, do you really think that there was nothing he could do to enter the Crimson Spire? No, he simply changed his mind. Why return if he can live like a king here in the Dark City? He abandoned his duty as an awakened and submitted to the spell. And because of how he reigned, destroying people before they grew powerful enough to threaten his rule, Gunlog also prevented anyone else from trying. However, Sunny glimpsed something else from what Nephi's had said, a hint of her true motivation. The words she chose to condemn Gunlog were just too peculiar. Despite the fact that the Bright Lord had committed all sorts of atrocious acts and caused the deaths, humiliation, and sorrow of countless people, the thing that enraged Changing Star the most was not his corruption and cruelty, but something entirely different. The fact that he had submitted to the spell and failed to complete his trial, considering which family she hailed from. Was this the key to her mysterious goal? Frowning Sunny asked, "Don't you think that, maybe, he just wasn't willing to see hundreds of people die? All these young men and women living in the outer settlement and the bright castle, how many of them are you ready to sacrifice to achieve your goal?" He grew silent, afraid that her answer would confirm his suspicion. Neff straightened her back and glanced at him. Once again, her eyes were firm and calm. Without pausing to think, she said, not a shadow of a doubt in her voice, "All of them, of course." Sunny grimaced and turned away, feeling a terrible headache. The sun was almost gone and the night was following in its footsteps. He didn't have much time left. With a desperate smile, Sunny looked at Changing Star and asked, "What can be so damn important? What can be so valuable that you are ready to condemn everyone here to death?" He shook his head, guessing that he already knew. "Don't tell me that it's some stupid crap like bringing the glory of the immortal Flame clan back. Duty of the Awakened. What, you gave a terrible oath to become the first human to conquer the fourth nightmare, like your father conquered the third and your grandfather the second. Or even worse, is it something even more foolish? Are you planning to save the damn world?" Nephi stared at him for a few moments and then grinned. Something dangerous and unfamiliar awakened in her eyes. No, not completely unfamiliar. It was the same strange, maniacal glimmer he had seen once before, right after saying the three strange words to her. Aster Song Vale. Back then, for a few moments, Changing Star had turned from a calm and composed young woman into someone he wasn't sure he recognized anymore. With a soft chuckle, Neff shook her head. "Save the world? No, I'm not going to save the world, Sunny." Then the smile disappeared from her face, and white flames suddenly ignited in the depths of her cold, gray eyes. With dark and frightening conviction, she said, "I'm going to destroy it." Her words echoed in the darkness, making Sunny feel an irrational feeling of dread. He stared at her, both failing to comprehend and afraid to believe in what he had just heard. Destroy the world, what? Deeply inhaling the cool air, Changing Star looked up at the sky. "This world, Sunny, this cursed place, the dream realm. No, I won't be the first one to conquer the fourth nightmare. I will be the first one to conquer every nightmare. I'll go through them one after another, destroying anything and anyone who stands in my way. And when I get to the heart of the nightmare spell, I'm going to obliterate every part of it. I'm going to rip it to shreds. I'm going to decimate and bring it to ruin." She looked him in the eyes and said, "You think Gunlog can stop me? You think a fallen terror can stop me? Those three ghouls can stop me? No, Sunny, nothing will stop me. Anyone who dares will die. I'll kill them all." Taking a step back, Sunny stared at her with wide eyes. He shivered, feeling something cold touch the back of his neck. Then he grimaced and asked, a hint of anguish in his voice, Why do you want to destroy the spell so much?" A corner of Changing Star's mouth curled up slightly. After a few moments, she simply said, "Because I hate it." Sunny blinked, stunned by the simplicity of that answer. If it was someone else, he would have thought that they were lying. But Nephi's lived in a strange, stark world. She did things simply because she wanted to, and apparently wanted to destroy an eternal, omnipotent existence simply because she hated it. Why the hell not? He closed his eyes and whispered, "You are actually insane." Neff smiled. "What does it mean to be insane in a world that has gone mad? I would be wary of anyone who remained perfectly sane in this hell." Then she sighed. "So are we done here? Or do you have more questions? The sun is almost gone, so you'd better hurry up and ask them." Sonny shook his head and said, his voice hoarse, Yeah, Neff, I'm done." With that, he slowly turned around and took a step forward. Left behind, Nephis frowned. "Where are you going? Come back here." He waved a hand and said in a suppressed tone, refusing to turn his head, "Sorry, I have an errand to run. We'll talk some other time." Her frown deepened. Looking at his back, Changing Star gritted her teeth and called, "I said come back, Sonny. This conversation isn't over. Come back here right now." But there was no answer. Sonny had already disappeared into the shadows, leaving her standing alone in the alley that was brightly lit by the last light of the dying sunset. Sometime later, Sonny was walking through the ruins, Harper's dead body weighing on his shoulder. The young man was very gaunt back before he had been killed, so it wasn't much of a burden. Physically, at least. It was the early hour of the night. Surrounded by nothing but darkness, Sonny was left alone with his thoughts and emotions. But strangely, both his heart and mind were empty. He couldn't be bothered to think or feel anything right now. It was all just too much and too sudden. Plus, he would much rather concentrate on not stumbling on some horrific monster. Ending up eaten by a nightmare creature right now would be very ironic, but still unpleasant. He felt guilty about murdering Harper, but not enough to die while trying to dispose of the body. He would much prefer not to die for his sins. Luckily, the area he was traversing was familiar to Sonny. He knew which streets were comparatively safe and which he needed to avoid, where the really horrible monsters lived, and where he could pass without being sensed by anything. Finally, judging that he was far away into the ruins, he found a partially collapsed house, climbed over the rubble, then hesitated for a few moments and threw the corpse inside. Harper's gaunt body rolled down the rocks and disappeared into the interior of the house, where no one would ever see it. Here done, that part at least was finished. It was time to go back. Sonny turned around and stared at the distant silhouette of the tall hill, with the magnificent castle standing on its top. Right now, hundreds of people were sleeping there, either in the pitiful hovels of the outer settlement or in the safe and warm rooms of the ancient stronghold. Neff, Cassie, and Effie were there. Harris, Gemma, and Gunlog the Bright Lord were there too. And many others. And most of them were going to die. Looking at the white marble walls of the castle, Sonny could see his future vividly, watching helplessly as Changing Star builds her sect, helping her defend herself from Gunlog, going on hunts, being invisible once he comes back, afraid to get close to anyone, lest the same thing that happened to Harper repeats itself. Up until the moment everything ends in bloodshed and terror. Castor was there, too, waiting to use his leverage over Sonny to make him his obedient minion. Sonny wasn't deceived by the amiable personality of the handsome legacy. He knew that nothing good was going to come of accepting his help. In the end, he just stood in the shadows and looked into the distance, at the tiny human enclave that persevered against all odds in the cursed nightmare of the Forgotten Shore like a lone glimmer of light. After remaining motionless for a long time, Sonny quietly sighed, turned his back to it and slowly walked into the darkness. 3 months later, Sonny was back at the castle. Well, to be precise, he had returned here once before to buy a few items that were hard to come by in the ruins. However, back then, Nephis and her cohort had been away on a hunt. No such luck today. The moment he had been dreading for so long was finally here. Hearing Changing Star's voice, Sonny slowly turned around, glanced at her, and forced out a smile. "Hey, Neph, long time no see." He tried to sound casual, but a slight tremble betrayed the storm of emotions raging in his heart. Why did she have to be here? The turmoil of their sudden meeting was exasperated by the fact of how different they looked. The past months only made Nephi's appear more radiant and splendid. Her white armor was pristine and graceful, her silver hair clean and combed. Sunny, on the other hand, looked like a pile of dirt that had somehow come to life. Both he and the puppeteer's shroud had seen better days. He didn't want to see her, but even more than that, he didn't want her to see him in this sorry state. What if Neph gets the ridiculous idea that he was somehow miserable after falling out with her? Nonsense. He was doing better than ever. He lived in a palace, ate delicious food every day, and had even become incredibly wealthy. If anyone should be miserable, it would be her. You do realize that you said that out loud, do you? Sunny blinked, remembered where he was, and stared at Changing Star in shock. Huh, what? She smiled with a corner of her mouth. You just zoned out and mumbled, "Why did she have to be here?" under your breath. That was not very polite. Sunny hid his embarrassment behind a grin and said, "Yeah, well, I meant it." Neff sighed. "I'm glad to see you too, Sunny. It's good that you're alive." Trying to conceal his discomfort, he shrugged. "What, you didn't expect me to survive without you?" She looked at him for a while and slightly shook her head. "No, on the contrary, I knew that you would be fine." Then she paused for a moment and added in a flat tone, "After all, a cockroach like you is not easy to kill." Sunny scoffed. "Now who's being impolite?" Nephi stared at him in confusion for a couple of moments, then chuckled. "Oh, sorry, I meant it as a compliment." He was glad to see Neph too. As much as Sunny wanted to deny it, he had desperately missed her calm presence. Somewhere along the way, without even noticing, he had grown reliant on having her by his side. But meeting her was also a nightmare. After all, nothing had really changed after their bitter quarrel. Even though the intensity of it all diminished, the future that Cassie had foretold was still inevitable. Now that the initial shock of running into Changing Star disappeared, Sunny took a closer look at her. Nephi's looked stronger. He didn't know how much soul essence she had been able to absorb while he was gone, but it seemed like it was a lot. Neph was always confident and arresting, but now her presence grew to a completely new level. But then again, he was not the same weak fool either. The Dark City had made him into a fearsome creature as well. The months he had spent hunting monsters in the absolute darkness of the cursed ruins turned him stronger, smarter, and much more deadly. If a little bit insane. Sunny doubted that any human on the Forgotten Shore had killed as many powerful nightmare creatures as he had in the same amount of time. At least not in single combat. Don't go on a tangent and forget where you are again. With a flinch, Sunny realized that he had been silent for a long time. An awkward silence hung between them, threatening to make him look bad. I need to say something like, how have you been? No, that's a stupid question, how about? However, before he could speak, Nephi's asked, so what brings you to the Bright Castle? Are you back? Startled, he scratched the back of his head and scrambled to find an answer. Oh, just doing some shopping. She blinked. Shopping? Wait, did that sound weird? Sunny's eyes widened. Wait, did I say that out loud again? He slapped his mouth shut and looked at Changing Star in horror. Goddammit, who knew that a habit of talking to myself would be so detrimental to keeping my dignity intact? On the ground next to him, the shadow was having a swell time basking in his anguish. It was shaking its head and dying laughing. Several seconds later, Sunny was finally able to speak again. Yeah, shopping. I have some soul shards to spare, so I wanted to buy a memory, or few. Nephi's looked at him for a while, then said, I see. Then she turned away and asked, her voice calm and even as always. Do you want to go somewhere and talk? Sunny's heart skipped a bit. He gritted his teeth. Sorry, no can do. I'm waiting for someone. Changing Star lingered for a few moments, then asked, "You're hiding in that alley because you're waiting for someone. Who are you waiting for, Sonny?" He waved a hand. "Oh, you know, a friend. Well, more like an associate, really. An acquaintance." Neff remained silent for a few moments, then said in an even tone, "You can just say no. No need to invent some." But right at that moment, an enchanting voice came from the entrance of the alley. "Sonny, hey, are you here?" Turning around, Sonny saw a beautiful young man with gorgeous auburn hair and mesmerizing green eyes enter the alley. He was wearing an armor made out of burnished brown leather and blue silk clothes beneath, all of which fit him perfectly. On his face, there was a bright smile. It was Kai Knight, whatever his name was. Sonny exhaled with relief. "What do you mean, invent? See, he's right." However, the words died on his lips, because, when he turned to Changing Star, he saw something that he had never seen before. Looking at the young man whom he had set free from the bottomless dark well, Nephi's took a step back. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide and glassy. She seemed to be consumed by absolute, utter horror. Sonny had never seen Nephi's show fear before, not to mention being truly horrified. Instantly, every muscle in his body tensed, and a cold shiver ran through it. It can't be, it can't be. She was a person who faced demons and fearsome abominations without even flinching. What could scare her so much? Was he mistaken? Was Kai an incarnation of some primordial evil after all? How could this be? Panicking, he turned back to face the charming young man and outstretched one arm, ready to summon the Midnight Shard. Not that it would help if even Changing Star was scared. But to his surprise, Kai wasn't showing any signs of being an ancient terror. In fact, he was looking at him with a cute expression of confusion. Sonny, who is your friend?" No, it didn't make any sense. Not only was Sonny sure of his judgment, he had also seen multiple people greeting Night as though they knew and liked him. He couldn't be a nightmare creature. Then what was wrong with Nephi's? Keeping his shadow's gaze on the charming archer, Sonny slowly turned back and glanced at Changing Star. She was still standing there, seemingly paralyzed by fear. What was going on? Neph. She flinched and tore her eyes away from Kai. After a few seconds, Changing Star cautiously leaned forward and whispered, "Sonny, what is Night doing here?" He frowned. "He's the friend I was telling you about." She lingered, then shook her head. "No, I mean, what is he doing here?" The emphasis was on the word here. Where else would he be? Completely lost, Sonny struggled to understand what was going on. Maybe she knew something about the kidnapping. That didn't make sense. Finally, he said, "I saved his life in the ruins, so he's doing me a favor in return." Nephi stared at him with desperation, then shook her head again. "No, I mean, what is Night doing here, on the Forgotten Shore?" Sonny scowled. "Did you guys know each other in the real world?" Nephi's looked at him with a funny expression. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she forced herself to speak. You don't know who he is." Meanwhile, Kai, who was politely staying silent through this whole weird conversation, smiled dazzlingly and said, "He really doesn't, isn't it wonderful?" Sonny gave him a dark look. "How would I know who he is? Make sense, please." Neff was silent for a while, then loudly whispered, "That's Night, you idiot. Night from Nightingale the Night." What was she going on about? He had no idea what that meant. Sonny rubbed his face with irritation. "What are you talking about? What is a nightingale?" Nephi's looked at Kai, paled even more, and finally said in a small voice, "It's only the best and most famous idol group of the last decade. Triple Orpheus winners, 100 consecutive weeks at the top of all charts, 6 diamond albums. That Nightingale, that Night, the lead vocalist." Sonny simply stared. "Wait, are you telling me?" Was she so out of it because Kai used to be a member of some stupid boy band in the past? Changing Star was not horrified, she was starstruck. He remained silent for a while, and then exploded into laughter. Gods, oh gods, Nephi's is a fangirl, what the spell that's too funny. Come to think of it, when they first met, she had been wearing headphones the whole time. He should have realized that Neph was into music much earlier. Mighty and stoic Changing Star, brought down by a dainty idle boy. That was just too hilarious. He wasn't even jealous. What were the chances of meeting her bias in the damn dark city? You couldn't come up with that crap. As he was dying from laughter, both Changing Star and Kai glared at him with difficult expressions. However, Sunny just couldn't stop. His laughter only died down after he began wheezing. Sorry, I just didn't expect it. From you? Ha, oh gods. As for your question, Knight has been here for about 2.5 years. He lives in the castle. Nephi seemed thoughtful for a few moments, then glanced at Kai with wide eyes. 2.5 years. But I thought that Nightingale was just on hiatus because of Gale's solo project. Oh, there's a Gale too, I can't even. Kai smiled apologetically. I'm afraid not. I have indeed spent all this time here in the Dark City. My agency had to come up with some cover story, I guess. With how things are, they can't even spin things and release a posthumous album, poor guys. You know, since I'm not technically dead or even hollow. Just asleep. Neff gave him a shy nod. Oh, I see. Trying to remove the awkward atmosphere, Kai offered her another smile. By the way, it's so nice to meet another friend of Sunny's. What a surprise. I thought that he was a a solitary person. I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your name. Was it Neff? Looking at him, Sunny grinned. Then he cleared his throat and said in a relaxed tone, "Oh right, I forgot to introduce you. Sorry, my bad. Knight, this is Nephi's. Although these days she goes by another name. You might have heard it, meet Changing Star of the Immortal Flame Clan." Now it was Kai's turn to stare at Neff with horror. The corner of his eye twitched. However, perhaps due to his idle training, he managed to hide his emotions much faster. Blinking a few times, he lingered for a moment, and then said in his smooth, enchanting voice, "Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you, my lady. I have heard so much about you. It's an honor." Nephis turned away, trying to hide a hint of blush on her cheeks. Staring at the wall of the alley, she hesitated, then awkwardly said, "So, your friend is already here, Sonny. Can we go have a talk now?" She glanced at him and added after a bit of hesitation, "I have something important to discuss with you. It's a matter of life and death." Sonny blinked a couple of times, digesting her words. A matter of life and death. If Nephis used these words, the situation was indeed dire. She was not someone to throw words to the wind. However, she was also not to be trusted. No matter how much Sunny wanted for things between them to go to the way they had been before, he knew that it was impossible. There was no way back for either of them. Sunny knew the true face of Changing Star now. He had seen the endless force of her conviction. In the flaming white inferno of her soul, all things were reduced to ash. Human concepts like loyalty, mercy, and affection had no hope of escaping that annihilation. No matter what bonds connected them, Sunny could not trust Nephis to put them above her boundless obsession. If push came to shove, she would sacrifice anything or anyone to achieve her goal, including him. At least that was what he believed. What's more, despite the fact that she tried to hide it, Sunny could feel that Neff's demeanor toward him had changed as well. He couldn't tell how exactly, but there was something almost imperceptibly different about how she looked at him. Once broken, trust was not easy to put back. Perhaps it was simply impossible. And yet, despite all that, was he really capable of refusing her plea for help? Sunny sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. No, he didn't think he was. Even if things between them became strained, she was still one of the only two people he cared about in this world. The way he felt toward Neff was almost like a second flaw. No matter how much he wanted to, he just couldn't get rid of it. Somewhere along the way, it had taken root in his soul. He had hoped that it will wither and die if they were apart, but instead, it just grew stronger. And now there was no escape from it. Sonny could feel himself being pulled back into the mess of humanity once again. Damn it! This was exactly why he had been reluctant to return here. After suffering so much to leave it all behind, why would he ever want to abandon his peaceful, pleasant, delightful life of solitude? Curses! But he just couldn't refuse Neff. However, that didn't mean that he was going to become her compliant sidekick again. Even if they were going to work together, they were going to do it on his terms. Focus, you came here to purchase memories to feed for the Stone Saint. Changing Star was looking at him expectantly. Sonny tried to appear confident and casual as he said, "We can have a talk, but not right now. I'll come find you when I'm done with my business." Whatever it was that she wanted to discuss, it could not be extremely urgent. After all, Nephi's had no idea that he was going to return from the ruins today. If there was no time to waste, she would not be wasting it on him, logically. Changing Star was silent for a few moments, her face indifferent. Then finally, she answered in a flat tone. "That is fine, you know where to go." Sonny smiled. "Oh, and if you don't mind, I'll bring Night with me." Both of them stared at him with the same doubtful expression. "You will?" Turning to the charming young man, Sonny pretended to be surprised by his question. "Don't you want to meet my other friends? They'll be able to answer all your stupid questions for sure." Knight hesitated. "I guess." "Wonderful." Sonny gave him a nod and glanced at Nephi's, who was clearly wondering if her idol could really be trusted. "It's decided then. Now if you'll excuse us." Truth be told, he didn't trust the pretty archer that much either. But his ability to detect lies would come in incredibly handy during the conversation with Changing Star. She was the one and only graduate of Sonny's School of Deception and Lies, after all. Pushing Kai away, he waited until they were at an appropriate distance and asked, "So, what did you find out about the memories?" Soon enough, they were entering the bright castle. Sonny felt strange returning to this splendid, suffocating place. This time, he came as a guest of a well-regarded resident, not as a slum dweller seeking to exchange a soul shard for a moment of respite from the cold, darkness, and terror. The guards did glance at him with disdain, but remained passive. Walking under the swinging skulls, they entered the familiar hall of beautiful colored glass windows. The opulent desk that Harper used to sit behind was still there. Only now, a similarly downtrodden young woman was scribbling on a piece of parchment instead. The world didn't care about the death of one little human. It just moved on, instantly replacing that which was lost. "Forgetting it." Sonny grimaced. "So you did find me some memories to buy. What are the prices?" Kai smiled, gestured him to follow, and said, "I did you one better. I actually managed to get us an invitation to the memory market." Sonny frowned. "A what? Never heard of it." The charming young man gave him a nod. "That's not surprising. It's a place where you can peruse various memories and purchase them for an acceptable price. I say acceptable, but you know who has all the shards in this place. So, usually, they only let the members of the host in." Made sense. Gunlog would never allow memories to freely circulate among people who did not belong to him. The guards and hunters, though, needed a place to exchange memories that didn't fit their aspects for either shards or something that did. "Then how did you get the invitation?" Kai shrugged. "It's not that hard if you have the shards. Problem is, very few of us free folk do." To Sonny's surprise, they actually entered one of the forbidden areas of the castle. After walking down a few long corridors and going down several flights of stairs, a sturdy wooden door appeared before them. There was a symbol of a sword and shield drawn on it. Winking at him, Knight opened the door and walked inside. Sonny followed. Once he saw the interior of the room, his eyes glistened with excitement. Behind the door, there was a medium-sized hall that had no windows. It was illuminated by a strange lantern that levitated in its center, radiating a bright and stable glow. Along the walls of the room stood various weapon racks, wooden mannequins dressed in full suits of armor, and tables with a wide assortment of beautiful and intriguing objects placed upon them. All of it, the weapons, the armors, the objects, even the levitating lantern, were memories. Sonny felt a thundering thought explode in his mind. For a few moments, he was only able to think about one thing. Money, that is so much money. Inside this unassuming hall hid a fortune that could rival that of an entire corporation. He was barely stopping himself from drooling. Sonny. Brought back from his covetous stupor, Sonny blinked a couple of times and glanced at Kai. Huh. The beautiful archer hesitated for a moment, then said, "I was saying this is Stev. He is in charge of this place." Only now did Sonny notice that there was someone else in the room. It was a man that was old by the standards of the Dark City, nearing 25 or so. He had a round face and cheerful eyes, which were currently full of doubt and hints of disgust. His gaze, of course, was aimed at Sonny. "Have you looked in the mirror, bastard?" Apart from his extremely tall stature, there was one other special thing about Stev's appearance, and it was that he was fat. He was the first obese person that Sonny had met in the Dark City. Having a belly like that in a place like this must have required a lot of work, talent, and dedication. He didn't know whether to be impressed or appalled. In any case, Sonny decided to not get on Stev's bad side. He wouldn't want to get eaten by this ogre, after all. Nice to meet you, Stev. I'm Sonny." The ample giant looked down at him, then glanced at Kai and said in a strange voice, "Knight, my dear friend, are you sure this dirty vagrant is a customer?" Sonny frowned. Be civil, be civil." "Hey, fat bastard, are you sure that this dirty vagrant won't break every bone in that fat blob you have for a body?" In the dead silence, both Kai and Stev stared at him with wide eyes. Then Stev leaned back and let out a thunderous laugh. "This little gremlin is a funny one, Knight. Well, good, very good. If there's one thing I lack in this cave, it's entertainment." Chuckling, he shook his head and said, "Still, my goods aren't cheap, my dear friend, Sonny. A good memory will cost you a dozen shards at least. Much more if you want something really useful. Are you sure you have the means to shop here in my emporium? How many shards can a slum rat like you have?" Sonny blinked. "I think there was a misunderstanding. Have you seen me? Do I look like someone who would ever be able to buy something from you? Of course not. I've never even absorbed a single soul shard that should tell you how many of them I have." Kai gave him a strange look. Because of how confident Sonny had been while traversing the ruins, he must have assumed that his companion was sufficiently powerful. However, now he suddenly learned that Sonny had never absorbed any soul essence. With his ability to sense lies, the charming archer would know that it was the truth. Well, of course it was. He absorbed plenty of shadow fragments instead. Sonny gave away that misleading secret on purpose. He didn't want Knight to start questioning the amount of soul shards he was about to spend. Letting the archer think that he was too obsessed with wealth to expend any on increasing his power would, hopefully, lessen the impact a bit. Meanwhile, Sonny shook his head. "No, no. Kai here is the one who will be handing you the shards. I'm just here to point him at the right ones. I have an eye for good memories, you see." By which he meant that his eyes were literally capable of peering into the very essence of memories and discerning their true traits, but neither of them needed to know that. Stev scratched the back of his head. Well, in that case, take a look around. Ask me any questions if something catches your eye." Then he glanced at Knight and scoffed. "You could have just asked me for advice, you know. It's not like I can lie to you." Kai smiled with embarrassment. "Oh, yeah, sorry." When Stev walked away, he leaned to Sonny and whispered, "So the favor you wanted from me is to pretend to buy a memory and then give it to you, so that no one knew that you have a hidden ace." Sonny stared at him. Actually, it was a good theory. Having a weapon or tool that no one knew about was a very good advantage. Unfortunately, Kai didn't really know who he was dealing with. Sonny shook his head. "No, I don't want you to buy a memory on my behalf." Then with an earnest smile, he added, "I want you to buy around 10. Kai's beautiful green eyes widened. Leaving the charming archer struck dumb and speechless, Sonny walked away and started perusing the various memories on display. There were a lot of them. By his estimations, at least 100 if not more. All sorts of weapons immediately attracted his attention. There were straight swords, curved swords, estocks and rapiers, scimitars and sabers. Various daggers and knives called to him, shining in the bright light on the enchanted lanterns. There were a dozen or so of polearms, from spears to glaives to halberds to naginatas. Several battle axes were displayed nearby. Further away, war hammers, maces, and flails radiated a silent feeling of crushing force. A few bows received a dreamy look from Kai. There were suits of armor, too, from leather to metal, light to heavy, scale to plate. Elegant, unrefined, graceful, barbarous, whatever a person could wish for. Some of them were shaped like actual armor, others looked like cloth garments. Placed on tables, various objects begged for his attention. Gods only knew what enchantments they possessed. Well, to be precise, gods and Stev. And Sonny. Walking among the memories, he would periodically place his hand on them. Immediately, the inner weave of the memory would be laid bare to his eyes, which were changed forever by the drop of Weaver's ichor. Studying the logic of the weave, he was able to glimpse its purpose. Of course, there weren't any truly remarkable memories in the hall. Who would want to sell something like that? However, even then, he managed to separate really good ones from simply acceptable, from borderline awful. That last category was what he came here for. Quantity over quality, remember. Sonny was almost done choosing the absolute worst memories out of them all when his sight suddenly fell on a badly illuminated corner. In that corner, covered in a thick layer of dust, stood a seemingly discarded suit of armor. When Sonny saw it, his hand slightly trembled. For a moment, Sonny froze. However, a second later he continued to behave just like before, as if nothing had happened. The first rule of haggling: never let the enemy see that you're interested in buying something. And Sonny was dead set on haggling until Stev's ears started to bleed today. Pretending as though he had not noticed the dusty armor, he walked around a bit more, slowly approaching the corner where it was displayed. Judging by the neglect with which the armor was kept, the master of the memory market did not know its true value. Sonny really wanted to keep it that way, because, if he was right, that armor was much more valuable than anything else here. He didn't know for sure, but suspected that it was nothing short of a true treasure. Because he recognized it. The suit of ancient plate armor was jet black in color, its design intricate and solemn. It radiated a feeling of dark resolve and stalwart, adamantine grace. All parts of it were perfectly fitted to one another, creating an almost seamless barrier of impenetrable steel. Or rather stone. Because the dusty armor was almost exactly the same as the one the stone saint was wearing. Of course, there were some differences. For starters, this one was somehow more impressive. It felt as though it had once belonged to a creature of higher status than the steadfast Shadow. While Shadow's armor was made out of dark granite, this one was cut out of pure black onyx. Its glossy surface seemed to absorb and devour any light that fell on it. And that was just in its dormant state. Once it was animated like that of the stone saint, who knew how fearsome it would become. Why was this treasure gathering dust in a badly lit corner of the memory market? Sonny frowned. Yes, he was most likely the only person in the dark city who had seen the formidable living statues up close. But still, everything about the onyx armor screamed of how incredible of a memory it was. What was it doing here, neglected and seemingly forgotten? He had a lot of questions. Finally, he managed to reach the armor without showing how interested in it he was. With a false expression of boredom on his face, Sonny raised a hand and absent-mindedly put it on the jet-black breastplate. A moment later, his mask of boredom almost cracked. His pupils widened. What he saw beneath the surface of the armor shocked him to the core. The weave of ethereal diamond strings inside it was on a completely another level from anything he had ever seen. It was much more complex and vast than even that of the puppeteer's shroud, which was not surprising, considering that there were no less than 6 glowing embers connecting it all together. And those embers were much larger and brighter than those inside his current memories. Sonny gulped. In front of him, covered in dust, was an ascended memory of the 6th tier, something that only a fallen terror could leave behind. Jackpot! His glee, however, did not last long. Almost instantly, Sonny noticed that there was something wrong with the weave of the onyx armor. It was damaged. Thousands of strings were torn apart, leaving the whole pattern broken and full of disharmony. Instead of flowing seamlessly, they floated in the darkness, untethered from each other and the nexuses. The whole thing was a mess. That's why he couldn't feel any logic or purpose in the weave. It was simply not there anymore. Sonny frowned. How could a memory stay damaged beyond repair? That didn't make any sense. Memories were supposed to repair themselves inside the soul sea as long as they were not completely destroyed. This rule was pretty much universal. It couldn't be broken. Unless a seed of understanding appeared in his mind. However, before Sonny could elaborate on his idea, Stev chuckled and put a giant hand on his shoulder. What an awesome armor, right, my dear friend Sonny? Saying that, he leaned forward and laughed. Throughout Sonny's exploration of the memory market, Stev had approached him several times to describe the most alluring qualities of his wares or simply to chat. He was obviously bored out of his mind in this windowless hall. Sonny stared at him and blinked a couple of times. If you only knew what kind of a priceless treasure this is, fool. Of all the pieces of crap in this market of yours, this one is by far the most outrageous. I can hardly believe that you had the audacity to show it to people. By which he meant that it was genuinely the best memory in this whole room, if not in the whole castle, except for Gunlog's golden armor, of course. However, if it sounded as though he was blaming Stev for being shameless and trying to sell people an utter piece of crap, well, he couldn't do anything about that, right? Stev sighed. Usually, I would get into an argument and try to defend my inventory, but I can't really disagree this time. This armor, no matter how awesome it looks, is indeed absolutely useless. It has been here from long before I was put in charge of the market, actually. I even consider it to be a sort of mascot. Sonny scratched the back of his head. How come no one ever bought it? He was pretty sure that he knew, but needed to hear what was Stev's explanation to glean how much the giant man understood. Stev shrugged. Why would anyone buy it? Have you not noticed that it's made of stone? Like actual stone. It's so heavy that not even Tessai can move under all the weight. Maybe an awakened would be able to, but to us sleepers, wearing this armor is pretty much like trying to walk around dressed in a mountain. And that stone is not that hard to break, too. He looked at the onyx armor and sighed. Actually, this armor has quite a story. It once belonged to a member of the legendary cohort that conquered this castle. Some even say that it belonged to the First Lord himself. Supposedly, it had an enchantment that made it much lighter back then. He looked at the armor with doubt. But when they were fighting some ancient terror, maybe the spire messenger who lived here, the armor was seriously damaged. Something went very wrong, the enchantment was broken, and it turned into a piece of stone. It's so damaged that even the spell can't make sense of it, simply describing it as unknown this. Sonny had to force himself to not hold his breath. The stone saint was, supposedly, created by one of the unknown. It made sense that the armaments of her kind were too. Regardless, it didn't matter that much. He was now pretty sure that he knew why the onyx armor was remaining in its dormant form and couldn't repair itself. It had to do with the difference between the sleepers and the awakened. Once a sleeper finished his trial by walking through a gateway, they would take the final step to becoming a true awakened. Their way of entering the dream realm would change, their aspect would unlock a second ability, and their core would evolve to the next rank. There was a quantitative jump in power, but most of the difference came from the qualitative one. Just like dreamers gained the ability to perceive and interact with soul cores, awakened were able to interact with soul essence. By channeling it inside their bodies, they were able to utilize it more efficiently and achieve greater results. The ability to channel soul essence was also vital to unlocking the full potential of higher rank memories. Besides the general rarity of such memories, there was another reason why legacy clans did not just equip their scions with weapons of tremendous power and let them sail to the gateway without meeting any resistance. It was because sleepers simply had no way to activate powerful enchantments. Even Gunlog was mostly using his transcendent armor just for its durability, with a single passive enchantment serving as a nice but unimportant bonus. In the hand of an awakened with the ability to channel soul essence into it, the golden armor would have been far more formidable. Which is where the paradox that rendered the onyx armor unusable came into play. From his experience dealing with the stone saint, Sonny knew that her armor, just like the strange creature itself, had a very special spell weave. It was, in essence, a living armament. Unlike most memories that could function on their own, it was simply a piece of dead stone when the main enchantment wasn't active. So, after the onyx armor was damaged, it had to be awoken with soul essence to assume its true form and repair itself. However, there was no human on the Forgotten Shore capable of channeling soul essence, and so it remained broken, which in turn made it useless to all the humans here. What a shame that I'll be able to buy it for a measly sum of soul shards from these fools and feed it to my shadow, huh? Sonny didn't really care whether the armor was intact or not. All he cared about was that it had 6 ascended embers that his stone saint could devour. Maybe she'll even gain something extra because of her close affinity with the armor. After all, they came from the same source. For a moment, Sonny considered the idea that his shadow might refuse to destroy the memory for the same reason, but then discarded it. She was just a shadow, after all. His will was her will, right? Now all that remained was to make the purchase. Sonny scoffed. So it's just a decoration. How tacky. Shaking his head, he threw one last glance at the onyx armor, forced himself to turn away, and continued to walk around the memory market. 10 minutes later, he walked over to Kai and silently handed him the rucksack. Then, he named the memories he wanted him to buy. The charming young man blinked a couple of times, then said, "Wait, you weren't joking. You really want to buy 10 memories?" Sonny frowned at him and hissed, "Keep your voice down. We need people to think that you are the one buying them, remember." Kai hesitated, then massaged his temples. "Sonny, my friend, don't take it the wrong way, but you do know how much memories cost, right?" Instead of answering, Sonny gestured to the rucksack. "Open it, you idiot." The archer sighed, and opened the clasp of the rucksack. Then he almost dropped it. Inside the crude backpack, dozens of soul shards were softly glowing in the dark. There were around 70 of them in there, at least. Kai's hands trembled. Raising his head, he stared at Sunny with wide eyes and whispered with horror. Sunny, where did you get all these shards?" 70 shards was more than most of the people in the Dark City would see in their lifetime. The contents of the unassuming rucksack were enough to start a chain of bloody conflicts that could culminate in a small war. Sunny stared at him and shrugged. "What do you mean? They were just gathering dust in my bedroom. I would bring more, but the rest wouldn't fit in the rucksack." Kai looked as though he was on the verge of fainting. Then he blushed in embarrassment. I bet he's remembering how he was bragging about being rich and tried to bribe me with a promise of 10 whole shards, which, in his words, was a small fortune. Ha! While Sunny was silently gloating, a sudden shadow ran over the beautiful archer's face. In a small voice, he said, "Wait, Sunny, did you say bedroom?" Sunny raised an eyebrow. "Sure, why?" Kai shut his eyes. "So you actually live in that cathedral?" There was no point in denying it anymore, really. "That's right." Looking at Sunny with a pleading expression, the charming young man asked, "Then what about the fallen devil? Is there really a fallen devil in that cathedral?" Sunny looked at him with confusion. "That bastard, yup, he's there, what about him?" A shaky breath escaped from Kai's mouth. Looking weak and defeated, he shook his head, opened his mouth, then closed it again and simply stared at a wall for some time. He had the look of a man who suddenly realized that nothing in the world made sense anymore. When Kai finally regained his ability to speak, his enchanting voice sounded strangely listless. I'll go buy the memories, I guess." Sunny offered him a bright smile. "That'd be great, thanks." Shaking his head, the archer called Stev over and slowly listed the memories that Sunny told him to buy, including the damaged onyx armor. With each next one he named, Stev's expression grew weirder and weirder. By the end, he was almost green. "The night. Buddy, I really don't want to offend our friend Sunny and your choice of advisors, but you literally chose the 10 worst memories I have in the inventory by far. If it was anyone else, I would have been ecstatic to get rid of them. But I simply can't do this to you. Please reconsider." Kai glanced at Sunny, asking what to do. It seemed that he didn't want to see his new friend make a terrible mistake. Sunny smiled. "Worst, you say? You said it yourself, right? Everyone heard that. I guess you'll give us a big discount then." Stev stared at him with a bizarre expression on his face. Then he said, "I don't think you understand. When I say worst, what I mean is that they're trash, complete trash. You do understand what trash means, right?" Sunny shrugged. "Well, you know what they say, one man's trash is another man's breakfast. Wait, no, another man's treasure. Yeah, treasure, that's right." Sometime later, in an empty corridor of the bright castle, Kai took Sunny by the hand. A moment later, several sparks of energy traveled between them. Sunny tilted his head and listened to the silence. Soon, he heard the faintly familiar voice of the spell whisper. "You have received a memory. You have received a memory. You have received a memory." After the 10th announcement, everything grew quiet again. Sunny grinned. Just like that, he had gained 10 memories to feed to his shadow. He even managed to purchase a Tier 6 Ascended armor for the laughable sum of 7 soul shards. What a bargain! It's good to be rich. However, soon the grin disappeared from his face. Instead, something dark glistened in his eyes. It was time to have a talk with Nephes. On the way out of the castle, Kai was strangely silent. Sunny didn't mind because he had a lot to think about. Going back to that lodge, there were a lot of things there that he had hoped to never see, feel, or experience again. For a moment, He even thought about rushing straight back to his cathedral without making good on his promise. But why should he? It's not like he asked to be invited back. Nephi's was the one who wanted his help with something. Just pretend like you don't care. Also, demand to be compensated for whatever it is they want you to do. You're an outsider now, and your services won't be cheap. Yeah, that was the best option. He wasn't going to agree to anything that didn't serve his own selfish interests. And there were a lot of things that Changing Star, with her thriving hunting party and following, could provide him with. There was this one thing in particular, something he really wanted to do but couldn't on his own. Maybe they would be able to help him with that. As they were approaching the lodge, Kai suddenly asked in a serious tone, "Sonny, why did you want me to come with you, really?" Sonny sighed. Glancing at the charming archer, he hesitated, then said, "I want you to tell me if I'm being lied to." Kai frowned. "I thought that Lady Nephi's was your friend. Why are you so wary of her?" Sonny chuckled. Was she a friend? Even he didn't know what exactly the two of them were to each other. Worse yet, he wasn't sure what they would become. She's the kind of friend you don't really want to lower your guard around. He lingered for a moment, then added, "There's also a guy called Castor. He's the one I especially don't trust." The archer raised his eyebrows. "I've heard only good things about Castor. Why him specifically?" Sonny cast a sideways glance at him and scowled. To be honest, Castor hadn't really done anything to deserve his hostility. But there just was something about the proud legacy that gave Sonny a familiar feeling. He was too perfect. In Sonny's experience, only people with bad intentions were capable of appearing so flawless. Perhaps he was wrong, but the policy of always assuming the worst had too clean of a track record to be abandoned now. "He just gives me the creeps." Seemingly satisfied with this answer, Kai shrugged and followed Sonny into the lodge. The headquarters of Changing Star's hunting party had changed a lot since his last visit. It had already looked pretty presentable back when he was a member, but now the lodge was much more impressive. The first thing that caught the eye was that it had grown much bigger. During the months of his absence, additional structures were built to expand it both horizontally and vertically. Now, it was by far the largest building in the outer settlement, almost starting to resemble a small town hall. It was heavily fortified, too, especially from the side that faced the White Road. A couple of lookouts were visible on the roof, observing the ruins below. They were wearing armor-type memories and holding bows in their hands. It was a far cry from how things were before. Inside, a lot of people were busy with various tasks. Sonny froze for a moment, disoriented by all the activity. He almost felt as though he had somehow mistakenly returned to the castle. The reason for it was not the neat and tastefully decorated interior, with warm carpets covering the stone floor and various tapestries hanging on the sturdy stone walls. No, the main difference was in how the people here comported themselves. The rod of hopelessness was almost gone from their eyes, replaced with energy and vigor. Sonny frowned. Why hasn't Gunlog put an end to all this yet? From everything that he saw, Nephi's was almost asking to be destroyed. How was all of this possible? His grim thoughts were disrupted by a young woman who greeted them with a smile. "Welcome, can I help you with something?" Sonny stared at the smiling girl, trying to remember if he knew her. No one came to mind. Trying to remove the scowl from his face, he answered in a flat tone, "Neph is expecting me." The young woman blinked. Sorry, who is Neph?" Sonny rolled his eyes. "Sorry, Lady Nephi's is expecting me. You know, Changing Star of the Immortal Flame Clan." The young woman's eyes widened. "Oh, I see. Let me show you the way." Sonny wanted to retort that he knew the way, but truth be told, he wasn't sure that he did. With all the changes that happened to the lodge, he had no idea where things were. On their way, they passed the tiny room that used to belong to him. Just as they were walking by, Sonny glanced inside and saw that it was now home to someone else. In fact, he recognized a couple of things that the new owner left on the narrow cot. They were casters. A corner of his mouth curled upward. Figures. It seemed as though he was thoroughly replaced by the scion of the Han Lee clan. Well, whatever. The cot was not very comfortable anyway, unlike his luxurious wide bed in the hidden chamber of the cathedral. Finally, the young woman led them to the area that used to be the central hall of the old lodge. Now, it was separated from the rest of it by a thick wall, with a sturdy wooden door barring the way inside. Sonny took a deep breath, then walked in. He had imagined that moment a lot of times in the past. Granted, he never thought that his reunion with the cohort would happen in the presence of an unreasonably attractive, washed-out pop star. But still. Inside the room, a wide window opened onto an eerily breathtaking view of the dark city. On the wall beside it, a map of the ruins was littered with various markings that contained valuable information. They seemed to be much denser than before. There was a large wooden table beside the window, around which stood 7 makeshift chairs. Currently, only 2 were occupied. Effie was sitting on one, her feet unceremoniously resting on the table. As always, she looked extremely comfortable and relaxed. On the chair next to her, a beautiful blind girl was cradling a cup in her delicate hands. It was Cassie. Nephi's and Castor stood near the map, discussing something with each other. The 4 of them were the core of the immortal flame hunting party. Once Sonny and Kai entered, everyone turned to them. Sonny put on a brave face and forced out a grin. Oh, so many familiar faces. Hi, everyone. No need to say how much you missed me. Anyway, this is Kai. Kai, say hi to everyone. These are Cassie, Castor, and Effie. You already know Nephi's. Giving him a strange look, the charming archer smiled dazzlingly and said in his stupidly beautiful voice, hello, Lady Nephi's Cassie, Castor, Huntress Athena. It's very nice to meet you." Cassie giggled. You won't believe it, guys. I thought I just heard Knight from Nightingale say my name. Crazy, right? Kai blinked. Oh, sorry, I am Knight from Nightingale, actually. Effie leaned forward and extended one arm. Cassie's face, meanwhile, grew deathly pale. An expression of utter terror appeared on it. Her hands trembled and the cup she was holding fell from them, catching the cup just a moment before it hit the floor. Effie sighed and shook her head. Every time, this happens every time. Sonny furrowed his brow and glanced at the beautiful archer with disdain. Oh, come on. Was that reaction really necessary? The 4 people in the room reacted to his arrival differently. Nephi seemed to be indifferent, as always. However, Sonny knew her well enough to notice a strange tension hiding in the depths of her calm gray eyes. Castor greeted him with an amiable smile, but there was coldness hiding behind it. It seemed as though the handsome scion was not happy about this turn of events. Did he see him as a rival for Neph's attention, or was there more to it? In any case, it was not Sonny's problem. He did not plan on returning to the cohort on a permanent basis. Castor could have all the attention to himself. Effie looked at him with a genuine surprise. "Doofus, you are actually alive." Sonny blinked and stared at her for a few moments, then said in an acrid tone, "Sorry to disappoint." She shook her head. No. Just how the hell did you manage to survive 3 whole months in the ruins?" He grinned. "What can I say? I had a good teacher." Since Effie was the one who taught him how to navigate the dark city, that compliment was directed at her. However, the huntress simply shook her head. No student of mine would be stupid enough to actually live in the ruins, not to mention returning looking so feral. Do I look feral? Sonny took a mental picture of himself. Ragged clothes, dirty hair, a crooked grin. a hint of madness burning in his eyes. No, he couldn't see anything wrong with how he looked. In fact, the thought he looked great. With an offended frown, he glanced at Effie and said, "Yeah, well, you look like you've gained a little weight. In all the right places. Focus, fool." The huntress glared at him for a few moments, then laughed. A girl got to eat, but also wanna die. And finally, there was Cassie. Cassie seemed to have changed the most out of all of them. The changes were not instantly apparent, but to Sunny, who knew her so well, they were unmistakable. The blind girl seemed more mature. She looked older somehow. It was as if there was an invisible weight pressing down on her, the kind that people usually accumulated with the flow of years. Her demeanor was calmer, more restrained, almost cold. "Welcome back, Sonny. I'm so happy that you are all right." Giving him a polite smile, she grew silent and turned away. This wasn't exactly the kind of welcome he had expected from her. He had been sure that the blind girl would give him a hug at least. That was how it always happened in his head. Maybe she is shy because of Kai. However, Sonny had a feeling that he already knew the true reason for her subdued attitude. He just didn't want to admit it. It was the vision, that damn vision. Chasing away the feeling of dread, he sat down on one of the chairs and offered another one to Kai. "So, what did you guys want to discuss?" Nephi's and Castor exchanged glances. Before saying anything, Castor walked over to the door and closed it. After that, he summoned a memory that looked like a bone flute and placed it on the table. Immediately, something in the room imperceptibly changed. Sonny raised an eyebrow. "What is that thing?" The handsome young man sat on a chair next to Changing Star and said, "This memory has an enchantment that creates a cone of silence. No one outside this room will be able to hear what we're talking about now." This fact alone was already enough to tell Sonny that they were going to discuss something that had to do with the bright Lord Gunlog himself. Suddenly, he felt an irrational desire to be anywhere else but in this brightly lit room. The wide window began to look very alluring. He sighed. "So the bright Lord is finally ready to obliterate you all. Can't say that I'm surprised. If anything, it's strange that he didn't make a move much earlier." Effie giggled. "Oh, did he ever?" Nephi's glanced at her, making the huntress fall silent and turned to Sonny. "You are right. The bright Lord is indeed about to make a move. We have withstood his previous attacks, but they were just a rehearsal, a few provocations to test our strength. Now he is ready to act in earnest, and that's why I need your help." Sonny raised his eyebrow. "How can a cockroach like me help the great and mighty Changing Star of the Immortal Flame clan?" Effie gave him and Nephi's a strange look, then cleared her throat. "Don't take it to heart, princess, but I sort of agree with Sonny. What can this little imp, no offense, Sonny, do that we can't? I mean, he is a decent scout, but—" "Hey, offense taken." Changing Star smiled, then looked at Sonny. "Don't be misled by his act, Effie. Sonny might behave like a cowardly weakling, but in fact, he's the last person in the Dark City I would want to face in combat. He is far more dangerous than anyone thinks he is. Isn't it right, Sonny?" The smile froze on his face. A few moments passed in silence with everyone staring at him. Finally, Sonny sighed. "Oh well, I guess the secret is out of the box. Surprise, everybody, I am actually not a weakling, who could have thought?" Then he glared at Effie and added in a mocking tone, "Oh, my mistake. Actually, everyone except for you already knew. It seems that you are." However, Neff interrupted him. "That's why he was able to survive 3 months in the ruins, just like he had survived 2 in the labyrinth. Sonny is an extremely formidable fighter." "Wow, is she trying to flatter me?" "He's just a bit of a devious asshole, but that's exactly what makes him so dangerous." "I guess not." Looking at Effie, Sonny shrugged and smirked. "If you don't believe her, just ask Knight." suddenly dragged into the conversation. Kai coughed, hesitated for a moment, and then said, yes, I can confirm. He is indeed a bit of an asshole. Sunny's face twitched. Not that, tell them how I saved you. The charming archer fluttered his eyelashes with an innocent look, then added, oh, right. Indeed, Sunny saved me in the ruins last night. He is a very exceptional and resourceful individual. Sunny glanced at Effie with triumph. He didn't really want to provoke the tall huntress any further, but she did call him a little imp. See, Knight has known me for just one night, but even he was able to see how fearsome I am. You and I, on the other hand, had hunted together for an entire month. How come you're so dense? Whatever, it's not like he would be spending a lot of time with Effie. Let her boil with anger. With a teasing smile on his lips, Sunny turned to Nephi's and asked, anyway, what exactly do you want me to do? Changing Star hesitated, then said, I want you to take Effie to your hideout in the ruins and keep her safe there for about a week. Sunny blinked. Oh no. I'm dead. Sunny grew silent and tried very hard not to look at the huntress, who was glaring at him with murder in her eyes. Did he hear it right? Excuse me, keep her safe. Nephi's gave him a nod, then hesitated for a few moments and sighed. I guess I owe you an explanation. With a frown, she glanced at the map of the dark city. Her gaze was fixed on the symbol of a tower drawn in its center with white paint. The bright castle. After a few moments, she said, you asked why Gunlog hasn't killed us all yet. This is a good question. However, the answer is complicated. Changing Star turned her head and looked at Sunny. Partially, it is because I have not challenged him openly yet. I also haven't done anything to justify an intervention. Everything we have accomplished for the benefit of the outer settlement not only fell outside the purview of his reign over the castle, but also strengthened the human position on the Forgotten Shore overall. Officially, he has no grounds to accuse me. Sunny scoffed. It's not like Gunlog really needs justification. He only needs the pretense of one, and even then just barely. Nephi slightly frowned. You are right. If he really wanted to escalate the situation and bring about an open conflict, he could have easily created a reason. Alternatively, he could have sent Horus under the cover of night to make me disappear without a trace. But he didn't, and we are not entirely sure why. Sunny blinked. You don't know. Glancing at Castor, Neff shook her head. There are several possible reasons. Perhaps he is uncertain if Horus will be able to dispose of me. Perhaps he is using the growing status of the outer settlement as a deterrent against his lieutenant's ambitions. Perhaps he is just confident and patient. Whatever the case, Gunlog more or less tolerated our existence for these past 4 months. Castor sighed and added, of course, there were still challenges we had to overcome. If we weren't cautious in how we dealt with these provocations, things would have been very different. Changing Star nodded. Indeed, there were several attempts to taunt us into confrontation already. Nothing too bloody, though. However, things seem to have changed. We received word from the castle that Gunlog is going to act against us soon. This time, he is aiming at one of my companions. The attack will be a serious one, and the target is Effie. Sunny glanced at the unruly huntress and raised his eyebrows. He had a lot of questions. Why her? Castor clenched his fists. It could have been any of us, really, but Effie, despite all my warnings, got into a rather vulgar argument with a bunch of guards who came into the outer settlement for some entertainment. Coincidentally, some of these guards went missing last night. No one knows what happened to them. And oops. Sunny was pretty sure that he knew exactly what had happened to them, though. After all, he was the one who killed them. But Castor didn't need to know any of this. Actually, I might know something about that, Kai suddenly said, smiling like an idiot. Who asked that fool to open his mouth? He tried to make the archer shut up with a murderous stare, but it was already too late. Kai enthusiastically went on to describe how he was kidnapped, put in the well, and then rescued by a mysterious stranger who turned out to be Sunny. Luckily, he was under the impression that the kidnappers were all slaughtered by the Black Knight, not realizing that Sunny was the one who had lured them into the cathedral in the first place, after personally killing their leader. If Kai knew the full truth, things might have turned rather awkward. After he was done talking, Castor sighed. "Thank you, this is a very valuable piece of information. Sadly, it doesn't change anything. Effie is still in danger. The Bright Lord is going to use her as a hostage and force Lady Nephis to challenge him. If she does, he will kill her. If she doesn't, Effie will die and our reputation will be ruined. Either way, he wins." Sunny cast a sideways glance at Effie, who was still relaxed and seemingly undisturbed by the prospect of dying horribly in the dungeons of the Bright Castle. In fact, she was currently more interested in fishing out a piece of meat that was stuck between her pearly teeth and not paying Castor any attention. What a lunatic, Sunny thought with scorn, making his shadow shake its head at the irony of that statement. Turning to Nephis and Castor, he asked, "How do you know all this?" In fact, this question was moot. He already had the idea. To receive information about Gunlog's plans, they had to have a spy in the castle. More than that, given the nature of that information, it had to be someone of considerable rank. Perhaps even someone in the inner circle of the Bright Lord. Was Neph working with one of the lieutenants? Sunny counted the number of chairs in the room. There were 7 chairs, but only 6 people. Interesting. Castor hesitated, then reluctantly said, "We have an ally." Sunny decided not to press the issue any further. Frankly, he didn't really want to know. There was just one last question he wanted to ask. "I see. Well, there is this one thing that I don't really understand. You said to keep Effie safe for a week. What is going to change in a week? I doubt that Gunlog will magically forget everything after a few days." A heavy silence descended on the room. No one seemed to want to speak first. After a few moments passed, Nephis finally broke the silence. Looking in the window, she leaned back and said in her usual even, indifferent tone, "In a week, we will be ready to leave the city." Sunny almost fell from his chair. That was not what he had expected to hear. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.